Welcome back to another deep dive into Fallout's darkest secrets. Today, we are uncovering one of the most terrifying theories in the entire Wasteland, the tunneler apocalypse, an extinction-level threat that makes the Great War look like a warm-up act. Let's descend into the divide and discover what really waits beneath the Mojave. You need to understand something right now. Something that everyone in the Mojave is too busy to notice while they fight their pointless war. I stood in the cave of the Abaddon 3 months ago and watched the future tear apart a Deathclaw in 11 seconds. Not metaphorically, I watched 6 creatures that should not exist swarm something that has terrorized the wasteland since the bombs fell, and I watched them reduce it to meat and bone with coordinated precision that would make Caesar's frumentari weep with envy. The Deathclaw killed 2 of them before it died. The other 4 did not even pause to mourn. My name does not matter anymore. What matters is that I carried a package from Navarro to Hopeville once, before I knew what Hopeville was, before I knew what packages could do, and in doing so, I cracked open the earth and released something that will consume every faction, every settlement, every dream of civilization that anyone in this wasteland still clings to. Ulysses told me their name, tunnelers, predators that make their own roads beneath the ground, he said. And when the divide broke their sky and showed them the world above, for the first time in 200 years, they learned the scent of new prey. I need you to understand how this started because nobody else will tell you. Nobody else knows except me and Ulysses, and he stayed behind at the edge of the divide with his flares and his explosives, buying time that will not matter in the end. The NCR knows something is wrong. I found the reports. NCR Bravo team sent communications about subterranean semi-humanoids before they went silent. The words are clinical, sterile, the kind of language soldiers use when they do not want to admit they are terrified. I know that language. I used it myself when I first entered that collapsed overpass tunnel and saw them moving in the dark. They are reptilian humanoids, but that description fails to capture what they are. Dark-scaled skin that absorbs light rather than reflects it, eyes that glow with bioluminescence, massive things adapted for eternal darkness, pupils that contract to slits when exposed to even dim light, mouths filled with serrated teeth designed for tearing meat from bone, chitinous spikes protruding from their shoulders and heads like organic armor plating. They move on 4 limbs with a fluidity that seems impossible for something that size, switching instantly from stalking crawl to explosive sprint without any transition, without warning. I was prepared for marked men. I was prepared for Deathclaws. The divide had already shown me horrors I thought would be the worst things I would ever see. And then I turned a corner in that tunnel, and they were just there, emerging from holes in the rubble, holes that had not existed moments before. 7 of them, moving with purpose, moving toward me with those massive eyes fixed on my position, clicking to each other in a language that was not random, was not animal. They were communicating, they were coordinating, they were hunting. One of them bit me. I put 3 rounds from my riot shotgun into its torso at point-blank range before I even registered the pain, and it still managed to sink its teeth into my forearm before dying. The venom burned like concentrated bark, scorpion poison, like liquid fire injected directly into my veins. I could feel it spreading, could feel my arm going numb and then beyond numb into something worse. Ulysses appeared from somewhere, I do not even remember where, and he had his hair already twisted into a tourniquet before I could process what was happening. "Get bit, hook and twist it," he said, working with practiced efficiency. Fast as blinking, does not give poison time to sink in. His tribe, the Twisted Hares, they knew things about wasteland survival that most people have forgotten or never learned. The snake bite tourniquet method. It saved my life. Without it, he said, I would have been dead in minutes. The venom is not like normal poison. It attacks the nervous system and the blood simultaneously, creating a cascade failure that antivenom cannot counteract fast enough. I watched my skin turn gray around the bite mark. Even with the tourniquet in place, I watched patterns of discoloration spread like frost across my arm. 3 hours later, After we killed the remaining tunnelers and escaped to higher ground, I could still feel the effects. That is when Ulysses started talking, not about the divide, not about the package I carried or what it had done, about them, about the tunnelers, about what they mean for everyone still fighting their pathetic wars on the surface. Radiation from the Great War might have created them, I suggested. Then, the detonations, the earthquakes I caused, those brought them to the surface. His response was measured, analytical. Makes sense, he said. Truth favors that explanation. There were signs they had been here for a long time, before the marked men, before what happened to the divide cracked their sky. If so, they were buried deep, might have been born the day America's embers started to settle, back in October of 2077. He had seen worse things twisted by radiation, he said, but there was something in his voice when he said it that suggested he was not entirely convinced. Radiation alone explained what the tunnelers had become. I pushed him on it later, after we set up a temporary camp and I tried to process what I had just survived. He told me then about his suspicions, about things he had seen in the Divide and in Big Matt that suggested something more deliberate than random mutation. The weather patterns around Big Matt, he said, are man-made, violent storms similar to those in the Divide, contained within that crater like an experiment that never ended. He tracked those patterns across the wasteland, following the connections between the old world scientific installations and their consequences. Big Mehmet had seismic testing equipment. They had facilities for experimenting with geological manipulation, with tectonic engineering, with technologies designed to weaponize the Earth itself. And Big Mate is located near the Divide, west of the Mojave, close enough that their pre-war activities could have affected Hopeville's underground structure. The earthquakes that destroyed Hopeville when those missiles detonated were catastrophic, yes, but they also created a network of tunnels and fissures throughout the entire region. Those tunnels gave the tunnelers highways. Those tunnels gave them escape routes, expansion opportunities, breeding grounds. But there is more. Chris Avalone clarified it in documents I found in one of the destroyed research facilities, documents that most people would never think to look for or understand if they did. Tunnelers were once human. The mutation that transformed them was heavy, prolonged, and almost certainly linked to exposure to the forced evolutionary virus, FEV, the same virus that created super mutants, that transformed humans into monsters at Mariposa and Vault-87, and a dozen other locations where pre-war science decided to play God. Think about what that means. FEV exposure combined with 2 centuries of underground isolation and radiation. The people of Hopeville who went underground when the bombs fell, who thought they were safe in their shelters and tunnels, who slowly transformed into something that could survive in absolute darkness, that could breed in those conditions, that could evolve hunting strategies and pack tactics and a society entirely separate from anything on the surface. They adapted, they thrived, and we had no idea they existed until I cracked their ceiling open and showed them the sun for the first time in 200 years. When you say slower death for the Mojave, I asked Ulysses, you mean they are spreading out from the Divide? Death will come from below, he said. His voice carried the certainty of prophecy, the weight of someone who has seen the future and knows he cannot stop it. In the Divide, you need to watch the sky and the ground. In the Mojave, it will be easy prey for them. They will start emerging throughout the Mojave in time. Might be years, probably less. They breed fast, hunt in groups, more than enough to bring down the strongest in the Mojave. Once they draw blood, the settlements will not be able to stop them. I have seen them tear apart Deathclaws, he continued. A Deathclaw might kill some of them, but the rest will swarm it, tear it apart like Denver hounds. That comparison made me cold. The Denver hounds were legendary for their pack hunting efficiency. Stories from traders who passed near Denver spoke of feral dogs that hunted with such coordination that even armed caravans avoided the area entirely. If tunnelers hunt like that, if they combine that pack intelligence with the ability to tunnel anywhere, to attack from below, to disappear underground when threatened and regroup for another assault, then Nothing in the Mojave has the defenses to stop them. NCR ranger stations are built on the surface with sandbag fortifications and chain link fences. Legion camps rely on wooden palisades and guard posts. Freeside has crumbling concrete walls. The Strip has security gates and concrete barriers. None of these defenses account for enemies that can tunnel underneath them. None of these defenses protect against creatures that can emerge in the middle of a settlement, in the middle of a military camp, in the middle of a city, and attack from a direction that nobody is watching. If you are still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button. I need people to know what is coming. I need people to understand that every day we waste fighting over a dam, fighting over territory, fighting over which flag flies where, is another day the tunnelers breed and expand and prepare for a war we do not even know we are in. The worst part is how fast they breed. Ulysses explained it to me while we watched the divide from a collapsed highway overpass, flares arranged in a perimeter to keep them at bay. One tunneler queen can produce dozens of offspring in months, not years, months, and there are multiple queens in the divide already. I know this because I found one myself in the cave of the Abaddon, and Ulysses suggested there were more queens deeper underground that I never reached, queens that have been breeding since before I ever delivered that package. I need you to understand the mathematics of exponential growth because most people in the Wasteland never learned it or forgot it matters. Start with 5 queens. Each produces 30 offspring in 6 months. That is 150 new tunnelers. Half of those are female. In another 6 months, those 75 females each produce 30 more. That is 2,250 new tunnelers in 1 year from just 5 original queens. In 2 years, you have numbers that dwarf every Deathclaw population in the Mojave combined, and tunnelers do not fight territorial battles with each other like Deathclaws do. They cooperate, they expand, they colonize new territory as a unified swarm. The Cave of the Abaddon is where I truly understood what we were facing. I detonated a warhead to open a passage through collapsed rubble, standard divide navigation, and entered a cavern that should not have been possible. The ceiling was lined with dozens of collapsed buildings, entire apartment complexes hanging upside down above me, held in place by some miracle of physics and rubble compression. The ground beneath my feet was the side of another building. Physics meant nothing here. Gravity worked in directions it should not, and everywhere, in every shadow, in every crevice, there were tunneler nesting sites. I counted 23 separate nests in the first chamber alone. Each nest showed signs of recent activity, disturbed earth, fresh excavations, the smell of something organic and wrong, like reptile musk mixed with human sweat and something else I could not identify. They had been here for decades, maybe longer, breeding and expanding in a space that the surface world did not know existed. The divide hid their empire from everyone until those missiles detonated and tore everything open. Then I saw her. The Queen. She appeared similar to a regular tunneler at first glance, but only until she moved. She was massive, easily 8 feet long from snout to tail, with musculature that suggested strength beyond anything I had seen from the smaller variants. Her eyes were larger, more developed, with a kind of intelligence behind them that made my skin crawl. She was not just hunting, she was evaluating. She was calculating whether I was a threat or just prey. The Queen hit as hard as anything except a Deathclaw, but faster. With the agility of something half her size, I emptied an entire magazine from my anti-material rifle into her before she even slowed down. The rounds that would have dropped a Deathclaw in 3 shots took 9 to bring her down, and even then she kept moving, kept trying to reach me with those poisonous jaws until blood loss and organ failure finally stopped her. When she died, the other tunnelers in the cave went silent. Not fled, silent. They stopped their clicking communication. They stopped moving. For exactly 17 seconds, they were completely still, and then they erupted from every hole in coordinated fury. 34 tunnelers attacked me in the next 8 minutes. I know the exact number because I counted the bodies afterward, because counting helped me process what had just happened, because my mind needed something rational to focus on instead of the reality that I had just survived something that should have killed me 10 times over. I used every explosive I had. I used choke points and elevation and the narrow spaces between collapsed buildings. I used fire and flashbangs and every dirty trick I learned in 200 hours of wasteland survival, and I barely made it out. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night, the thing that I think about every time I close my eyes. I killed one queen. One. And Ulysses believes there are more deeper underground that I never reached. Every day that passes is another day those other queens are breeding, producing offspring that will spread through tunnels I cannot map, through passages I cannot follow, preparing for an emergence that the Mojave cannot stop. The marked men understand. They use flare guns to ward off tunnelers. These are ghouls who survive nuclear hellfire, who walk through radiation that would kill a normal human in hours, who fear almost nothing in the wasteland. And they fear tunnelers more than they fear anything else in the divide. When marked men actively avoid certain areas, when they set up perimeter defenses specifically against underground threats, when they burn through precious ammunition and supplies, maintaining flare guns instead of using those resources for anything else, you know the threat is real. I tried to warn the NCR. I found a ranger patrol 3 weeks after I left the divide and told them everything about the tunnelers, about the breeding rates, about the tunnel networks spreading beneath the Mojave like cancer through a body. The rangers listened politely. They took notes. They thanked me for the information and filed it as divide horror stories, interesting anecdotes from a dangerous region that did not concern NCR strategic planning. They did not understand that every day means more tunnels, more nests, more hunters breeding in the dark. They did not understand that their war with the Legion is a distraction from the real threat. The Legion does not understand either. Caesar is so focused on his conquest, on his philosophical vision of synthesis between Anchor and Legion, that he cannot see the biological apocalypse breeding beneath his war camps. House does not understand. He is focused on Vegas, on his platinum chip, on his vision of pre-war glory restored. The Brotherhood does not understand. They are hiding in bunkers, hoarding technology, fighting a war against NCR patrols that stopped mattering the moment those missiles detonated and cracked the divide open. All of them are dead. They just do not know it yet. Ulysses understood this. That is why he wanted to nuke both NCR and Legion territories, not out of revenge, though there was revenge in his heart, not just to make a point about symbols and history, though those motivations were there too. He wanted to force humanity underground. He wanted to drive people back into vaults, back into sealed bunkers, back into defensive positions that could actually protect them from tunnelers. He saw the surface world as already lost, as a stage where actors were performing their final scenes without realizing the theater was on fire. He believed nuking the Long 15 and dry wells would force the NCR and Legion to retreat underground, to consolidate, to build defenses that accounted for threats from below instead of just from across no man's land. He believed that only by destroying their surface infrastructure could he save them from the tunnelers. I stopped him from launching those missiles. I convinced him there was another way, and every night since then, I wonder if I made the wrong choice. The tunnelers avoid bright light and loud noises. This is their primary weakness, the one vulnerability that keeps them from emerging on the surface during daylight hours. Flashbangs make them flee. Flare guns cause them to burrow and relocate. Direct hits from Tume. Flamers force them underground. But these are temporary measures, deterrents rather than solutions. The Mojave does not have industrial lighting. Most settlements barely have electricity. The infrastructure needed to create permanent bright light barriers around every vulnerable position does not exist, and rebuilding that infrastructure would take resources and time that nobody has. Let me tell you what tunneler expansion looks like in practice. I walked through tunnel sections where they had created branching passages leading in all directions, not random burrowing, organized expansion. Some passages headed east toward the Mojave proper, others went north toward areas I could not identify on any map. Still others went deep, descending into geological layers that should have been impossible to access without industrial drilling equipment. They were mapping the underground. They were creating highways through the earth. They were building an empire in 3 dimensions while everyone on the surface fought their 2-dimensional wars over territory that would not matter when the tunnelers emerged. NCR Bravo team's reports mentioned subterranean semi-humanoids before the team went silent. That clinical language, that refusal to use the word tunnelers or acknowledge what they truly are, tells me the NCR knows more than they are admitting. They know something is underground. They know their soldiers are disappearing in areas where tunnelers have been spotted. They know the divide harbors threats beyond marked men and radiation. But they are not sharing that information with their regular forces. They are not changing their defensive strategies. They are not preparing for underground warfare. The Legion is even worse. Their refusal to use technology, their preference for melee weapons and traditional warfare, their reliance on intimidation and psychological warfare instead of practical defense, all of these philosophical choices make them perfect prey for tunnelers. Legion war camps have no electric lighting. They use torches and fires that create shadows and dark zones where tunnelers can approach unseen. Their leather and metal armor provides no protection against venomous bites that attack the nervous system. Their combat doctrine emphasizes honor and direct confrontation, concepts that mean nothing to predators that attack from below and retreat before you can retaliate. I imagine the first Legion camp that gets hit by a tunneler swarm. Midnight attack, 50 tunnelers emerging from holes in the middle of the camp perimeter, moving through tent lines faster than sentries can respond. Legionaries reaching for their machetes and spears while poison shuts down their nervous systems. Centurions trying to organize defensive formations against enemies that disappear underground between attacks. By dawn, the camp is empty, bodies everywhere, survivors fled, and the tunnelers drag what remains underground to feed their young. It will happen to NCR. Bases too, just slower. The Rangers have flashbangs and flare guns, tools that can temporarily drive tunnelers away. But temporarily is the key word. Tunnelers do not give up. They probe defenses, they test perimeter security, they learn patterns, and when they find a weakness, when they find the moment when ammunition runs low or guards change shifts or attention wavers, they attack in numbers large enough that no defense holds. If this story has kept you listening this far and you want more of these dark confessions from the Wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores that reveal the truths everyone else is too afraid to face. The Wasteland's 3 great factions are fighting a war that will not matter in 5 years, maybe less. When tunnelers emerge from beneath the strip, the dam, and Camp McCarran simultaneously, when they attack from a direction nobody planned for because everyone was too busy watching the horizon, the political maps everyone died for will become irrelevant. Territory means nothing when the enemy owns everything underground. I spoke with Ulysses about this during our last conversation before I left the divide. He stayed behind deliberately, positioning himself at the edge where tunneler expansion meets the Mojave proper. He uses explosives to collapse tunnels. He maintains flare perimeters to drive them back. He fights a holding action that he knows cannot succeed long-term, but fights it anyway because someone has to buy time, even if that time is measured in months rather than years. You need to understand why he believes forcing people underground was the only solution. Vault-Tec ran experiments. Yes, cruel experiments that destroyed lives and communities, but those vaults, whatever horrors happened inside them, they had one feature that matters now: sealed environments, protected from external threats, defensible against enemies that cannot tunnel through solid vault door steel and concrete. If humanity retreated underground into properly sealed facilities, tunnelers could not reach them. The surface could belong to the tunnelers. Humanity could wait them out, could survive until the tunneler population stabilized or destroyed itself through resource depletion. But that option required sacrifice. It required abandoning everything on the surface. It required accepting that 200 years of rebuilding, of crawling back towards civilization, of establishing trade routes and governments and communities, all of that needed to be surrendered to save what remained of humanity. Ulysses was willing to make that choice. He was willing to nuke the Long 15 and dry wells, to force both NCR and Legion underground through catastrophic loss, to destroy their surface infrastructure so completely that retreat into sealed bunkers became the only survival option. I stopped him. I convinced him there was another way, that humanity could fight this threat on the surface, that we did not need to abandon hope and retreat into concrete tombs. Every day since then, I wonder if I made the wrong choice. The evidence suggests I did. I have been tracking reports for 3 months now, piecing together information from traders and travelers and the occasional NCR dispatch that makes it through official channels. Disappearances are increasing, small settlements going silent, caravans that never arrive at their destinations, prospectors who venture too far from established routes and vanish without trace. The pattern is spreading outward from the divide in a radius that expands faster than walking speed, faster than normal migration, consistent with coordinated tunneling and expansion. Nobody connects the incidents because nobody knows to look for the pattern. Each disappearance is investigated as a separate event. Raiders, they say, Deathclaws, bad luck, Legion raids, NCR patrols gone missing get blamed on Legion ambushes. Legion scouts who disappear get attributed to NCR rangers. Nobody considers that something beneath both armies is hunting them equally, that there is a third faction in this war that neither side acknowledges because acknowledging it would mean admitting their conflict is pointless. Here is a question I need you to consider, and I want you to really think about it before answering. If you learn tomorrow that tunnelers were breeding beneath your settlement, beneath your home, beneath everywhere you considered safe, would you flee or would you fight? Would you abandon your territory and retreat to higher ground, to sealed facilities, to places with industrial lighting and defensible perimeters? Or would you stay and defend land that tunnelers can tunnel underneath whenever they choose? Think about that choice. Think about what it costs either way. The Strip has some advantages. Electric lighting everywhere, Securitron patrols, concrete foundations that make tunneling more difficult. But the sewers beneath Vegas provide ready-made highways for anything that wants to move underground. Those tunnels connect to storm drains that connect to old subway systems that connect to basement levels of destroyed buildings. Tunnelers do not need to dig through the Strip's foundations. They can use infrastructure that already exists, can emerge through sewer grates and basement access points and forgotten maintenance tunnels that nobody guards because nobody imagines threats coming from those directions. House's Securitrons can fight tunnelers effectively if they detect them in time. Missiles and laser weapons and those rotating guns all function fine against biological targets, but Securitrons patrol the surface. They watch for human threats. Their sensor packages are optimized for detecting people trying to enter the Strip illegally or cause trouble in the casinos. They are not configured to monitor underground movement, to detect vibrations from tunneling activity, to identify thermal signatures of creatures moving through sewer systems. By the time Securitrons recognize a tunneler threat, the attack has already begun. The dam is worse. Open structure, limited lighting, vast areas of concrete, and machinery that create shadows and hiding places. The interior spaces, the turbine rooms and maintenance corridors and electrical systems, all of that provides perfect ambush terrain for pack hunters. NCR troops stationed at the dam focus on defending against Legion attacks from across the river. Their heavy weapons emplacements face east. Their patrols watch approach routes. Their defensive planning assumes enemies arrive from predictable directions. The notion that enemies could emerge from beneath the dam itself, could attack from inside the perimeter, does not appear in any tactical briefing I have seen. Camp McCarran sits on old airport grounds, which means the soil beneath it has been excavated and modified and built upon for centuries. Old drainage systems, forgotten utility tunnels, basement levels of terminal buildings, all of that infrastructure, all those underground spaces that made an airport functional in the pre-war world, they become highways for tunnelers. The NCR fortified the surface brilliantly. Sandbag positions, overlapping fields of fire, coordinated patrol routes. They created a defensive position that could hold against human attackers indefinitely. They did not create defenses against enemies that ignore surface fortifications entirely. I tried explaining this to an NCR officer once. I laid out the threat assessment. I showed him projections based on observed breeding rates. I described tunneler pack tactics and hunting strategies. He listened politely, thanked me for the information, and then explained that NCR's strategic planning had to prioritize immediate threats, and the Legion offensive represented an immediate threat, while tunnelers in the Divide were a regional problem that did not affect core NCR operations. That conversation happened 6 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, that officer's patrol disappeared completely while investigating reports of unusual activity near Searchlight. 12 soldiers, gone. No bodies, no signs of struggle beyond some disturbed earth and marks in the soil that could have been anything. The official report blamed residual radiation and bad luck. I know better. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It is the only way I know you like the video and want to understand the truth about what hunts us from below. Let me tell you the thing that terrifies me most about tunnelers, the detail that keeps me traveling, keeps me moving from settlement to settlement trying to warn people, even though most dismiss me as a Divide survivor with radiation sickness and paranoid delusions. It is not their breeding rate, though that is catastrophic. It is not their pack hunting tactics, though those are devastatingly effective. It is not even their ability to tunnel anywhere, though that makes them nearly impossible to defend against. What terrifies me is their intelligence. They communicate through clicks and body language. Yes, but the communication is sophisticated. I watched them coordinate a flanking maneuver against marked men, watch them split into groups and attack from 3 directions simultaneously, with timing that required planning and communication and understanding of tactical concepts. These are not mindless predators operating on instinct. These are thinking creatures with social organization and problem-solving capabilities. Chris Avallone designed them intentionally as an extinction event, as a way to reset the Fallout universe, to prove that all the faction politics and territorial disputes and philosophical arguments about civilization's future meant nothing when biological reality asserted itself. He wanted to demonstrate that the Wasteland itself was not done with humanity, that 200 years of rebuilding could be erased by something that evolved in the dark places nobody was watching. The tragedy is that he was right. Everything the Courier achieved in the Mojave, every faction recruited, every alliance forged, every battle won, all of that becomes meaningless when tunnelers emerge in numbers large enough to overwhelm defenses. The independent Vegas I fought for, or the NCR victory, or the Legion conquest, or House's autocracy, none of those outcomes matter. They are all equally vulnerable to enemies that attack from below. Ulysses understood this completely. He saw the tunnelers as the true inheritors of the Wasteland, the species that would survive when humans finally destroyed themselves through endless conflict. He wanted to give humanity one last chance by forcing them underground, by making them retreat and consolidate and build defenses that could actually work. He saw surface civilization as a doomed experiment, as people clinging to pre-war dreams while the Wasteland prepared to reclaim everything. I think about the marked men sometimes, about what they represent, humans so thoroughly ghoulified by radiation that they should not be able to function, yet they persist. They survive in conditions that would kill anyone else. They adapt, and even they fear tunnelers enough to maintain constant flare gun perimeters, to avoid certain areas entirely, to treat the underground as hostile territory that cannot be reclaimed. If creatures that survive nuclear hellfire fear tunnelers, what hope do normal humans have? The answer is preparation that nobody is willing to make. Sealed facilities, industrial lighting, coordinated defensive strategies that account for underground threats, resource allocation toward anti-tunneler measures instead of anti-faction military buildups, intelligence sharing between factions that currently refuse to cooperate. All of this is possible. None of it is happening. I am one of maybe 5 people who truly understand that humanity's wars are meaningless distractions from the real, existential threat breeding in the dark below. Ulysses is one. I am another. Maybe there are a few scientists in Big Matt who have figured it out. If any of them are still sane enough to care, everyone else is too busy fighting over flags and territory and ideological purity to notice the ground shifting beneath their feet. So I keep moving. I keep warning people. I keep hoping that eventually someone with actual authority, someone who can mobilize resources and change defensive strategies, will listen. But hope is a strange thing in the wasteland. It keeps you moving even when logic says there is no point. It keeps you trying even when every rational analysis suggests failure is inevitable. The tunnelers will emerge throughout the Mojave in years, Ulysses said. Probably less. I believe him. I have seen the evidence. I have tracked the expansion patterns. I have done the mathematics. In 2 years, maybe 3, tunneler populations will reach critical mass. They will have enough numbers, enough territorial coverage, enough established tunnel networks to launch coordinated emergence across the entire region. And when that happens, when thousands of them surface simultaneously in every settlement and military base and trading post, the war everyone died for will end in a way nobody predicted. Not with NCR victory or Legion conquest, not with House's vision of restored Vegas or independent Mojave freedom, with tunnelers owning the surface, with human survivors fleeing to whatever sealed facilities they can reach, with 2 centuries of rebuilding reduced to scattered holdouts trying to survive in a world where the dominant species hunts from below. This is my confession, my warning, my final testimony before I disappear into whatever comes next. I delivered a package from Navarro. I cracked open the divide. I released the tunnelers, and I stopped Ulysses from doing the one thing that might have saved humanity from what I unleashed. Those facts do not change regardless of what I do now. The consequences are already in motion. The future is already written in tunneler breeding rates and tunnel expansion patterns. But maybe, if enough people hear this, if enough people understand what is coming, if enough people prepare instead of dismissing me as crazy, maybe some will survive. Maybe sealed facilities will become priority. Maybe defensive strategies will adapt. Maybe humanity will figure out how to fight enemies that attack from below before the attacks become overwhelming. Or maybe not. Maybe everyone will keep fighting their surface wars until the day tunnelers emerge beneath their feet and teach them what real war looks like. Either way, I tried. I warned you. I explained the threat in detail that nobody can claim they did not understand. What you do with that information is your choice. The divide broke open something that 200 years of burial could not contain. The old world's weapons may have fallen silent, but the old world's experiments, its mutations, its consequences, those are still very much alive, still evolving, still preparing to reclaim what humanity thinks it rebuilt. I carry that knowledge everywhere I go now. I see settlements and think about how long they have before tunnelers find them. I see military bases and count the defensive weaknesses that underground attacks would exploit. I see people making plans for futures that will never arrive because the wasteland itself has other plans. This is the reality nobody wants to face. This is the truth everyone dismisses because accepting it would mean admitting that everything they fought for might be pointless. But truth does not care about acceptance. Truth does not care about hope. Truth simply is. The tunnelers are coming. They breed in darkness. They hunt in packs. They tunnel anywhere. And humanity is not ready.